Hi folks, this is Conandrum again. Today's video is about the shape of our world. Let's start with part 1, called Questions and Assumptions. Quite appropriately, I might add. This is an equation, y equals x plus 1, and this is the graph of the equation. Let's assume that x is equal to 5. Therefore, if and only if x is equal to 5, then it follows that y is 5 plus 1, which is 6. Similarly, if we assume that x is equal to 9, therefore, if and only if x is equal to 9, then it follows that y is equal to 10. So we have two different assumptions that have yielded two different outcomes. Y is equal to 6 if x is equal to 5, and y is equal to 10 if x equals to 9, and each outcome is only valid for only one of millions and millions and millions of infinite assumptions. So you tell me, how old am I? Let's see how clever you are. If y is my age, and x is my brother's age, how old am I? What's the problem? You don't have an answer? Or maybe you have millions of answers. If you assume that my brother is 10, then I must be 11. If you assume that my brother is 28, then I must be 29. If you assume that my brother is 113, then I must be 114. So how old am I? 11, 29, 114, 58, 231, 12, 43, which is it? Are you done assuming? Are you ready to quit? By assuming, you are merely asking me a question. You're asking me to tell you if you got it right. Well, you're all wrong, and if maybe one of you managed to get the answer right, it's only by accident. Since x is unknown, y is also unknown. Everybody can see that. You need more information. An assumption is not enough, is it? An assumption will never solve a problem. It is just a guess. Supposing a thing without a proof. It's a supposition, a postulate, an unwarrantable claim. There is only one truth, and your assumption is just a hypothesis, and is insufficient to unravel the truth. You cannot declare to me that you know the answer. You are merely assuming or guessing at the answer. These are two very different things. But I will show you something even more dangerous than pretending to know the answer. This is another equation. Z equals y minus 20. Z, in this case, is the number of wives that my brother had. Y is my age, and now his wives are directly linked to my age, which you do not know. And now you're making up stories, also known as theories or fairy tales.
Hey Angela, do you know that guy?
Yeah, I heard he is 28. The guy with him is his 27-year-old brother. He had 8 wives. Unbelievable. What a terrible womanizer. I saw the photos. It is confirmed.
No, that's not what I heard. He is 20 and his brother is 19. His brother was never married because he is gay. Just look at how he touches other men and you will understand.
You see how assumption upon assumption and conjecture upon conjecture is leading into an imaginary fairy tale. These are the dangers of assumptions and speculations. Having no undeniable proof, you're just gossiping and guessing at different answers out of a multitude of answers. But what happens if we know for sure that X is 22, my brother's age? If X is 22, then, in this case, we can no longer assume anything. Then it also must be true that 22 and 1 is 23, which is my imaginary age. There can be only one logical conclusion. Only with this fact that X is 22 can you know for sure what my age is. Then it also follows that Z is 23 minus 20, and only now can you know for sure how many wives my brother had. Exactly 3, no more and no less. There is only one truth, and you have to remember this for the rest of your lives. If anybody tells you otherwise, ask him to take the moral test. Conclusion. Assumptions are not facts, they are speculation. Therefore, do not portray your assumptions as facts unless you're stupid. The above is a fact, so let me repeat it. Do not portray your assumptions as facts unless you're stupid. Any assumption must be verified beyond a shadow of a doubt in order for it to become fact. Only at that point does it cease to be an assumption. So this is you, and this is a top secret military outpost. The location is unknown. Composition is unknown. It has 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of nighttime. The sun size is unknown. The sun distance is unknown. The shape is unknown. And your mission is to find out what shape this place is. Is it concave? Is it convex? Or is it flat? You're given 3 options. What indications do you have? You're given 2 flags, and the flags are placed 800 kilometers apart. One flag casts no shadow, where at the same time, the other flag casts a very definite shadow. So what shape is this place? Can you give me an answer? I hope you're not beginning to assume things now. We don't want to go into wild cuckoo land. Remember, the sun size and the sun distance are unknown. The only thing that is known is the length of the shadows cast by the flags, and nothing else. Can you determine the shape of this planet? Without this information, your conclusions are useless in this experiment. Part 2. Assumption and Deception. The story of Eratosthenes and Carl Sagan. So what were the assumptions that Eratosthenes made in determining the circumference of the Earth? Because that's what he tried to calculate. He made 4 assumptions. He assumed first that the Earth is a sphere and that we're living on the outer surface of the sphere. He then assumed that the sun is really far away and most probably very big, and that the sun's rays are straight and parallel at every single point on the surface of the Earth. Now, to be fair to Eratosthenes, essentially what he said was this: if and only if the Earth is a sphere, and if and only if we're living on the surface of the sphere, and if and only if the sun is huge and very far away from the Earth, And if and only if light from the sun travels in straight parallel lines from the sun all the way to the earth, then and only then does it follow that the circumference of this sphere is 250,000 stadia, which is a very close answer to the value accepted by modern astronomers, depending on how stadia are interpreted. And if and only if my imaginary brother was 19, he could be gay. Essentially, what Eratosthenes did was take a piece of circumstantial evidence, like this photo, and he said, if we assume that these 8 women are these guys' wives, then it follows that my age is 20 plus 8, 28. And if we combine that outcome with this equation, then it also follows that my brother's age is 27. Essentially, what Eratosthenes did was take circumstantial evidence combined with assumptions to reach a single outcome, a single conclusion out of the many millions and millions and millions of infinite conclusions that could be arrived at. So our friend Eratosthenes essentially proved nothing. He just made a number of assumptions in order to reach a supposed conclusion. And good for him. I would do exactly the same. This is what scientists do all the time, but real scientists do not push the supposition as a fact. This is called deception. And this is exactly what Carl Sagan and many others have done to all of us, pushing the supposed conclusion as a fact. And you, my friends, have been deceived.
There was once a time when our little planet seemed immense, when it was the only world we could explore. Its true size was first worked out in a simple and ingenious way by a man who lived here in Egypt in the 3rd century BC. This tower may have been a communications tower, part of a network running along the North African coast by which signal bonfires were used to communicate messages of state. It also may have been used as a lighthouse, a navigational beacon for sailing ships out there in the Mediterranean Sea. It is about 50 kilometers west of what was once one of the great cities of the world, Alexandria. In Alexandria at that time, there lived a man named Eratosthenes. One of his envious contemporaries called him Beta, the 2nd letter of the Greek alphabet, because he said Eratosthenes was 2nd best in the world in everything. But it seems clear that in many fields, Eratosthenes was alpha. He was an astronomer, historian, geographer, philosopher, poet, theater critic, and mathematician. He was also the chief librarian of the great library of Alexandria. And one day, while reading a papyrus book in the library, he came upon a curious account. Far to the south, he read, at the frontier outpost of Syene, something notable could be seen on the longest day of the year. On June 21st, the shadows of a temple column or a vertical stick would grow shorter as noon approached. And as the hours crept towards midday, the sun's rays would slither down the sides of a deep well, which on other days would remain in shadow. And then, precisely at noon, columns would cast no shadows, and the sun would shine directly down into the water of the well. At that moment, the sun was exactly overhead. It was an observation that someone else might easily have ignored. Sticks, shadows, reflections in wells, the position of the sun, simple, everyday matters of what possible importance might they be. But Eratosthenes was a scientist, and his contemplation of these homely matters changed the world, in a way, made the world. Because Eratosthenes had the presence of mind to experiment, to actually ask whether, back here near Alexandria, a stick cast a shadow near noon on June the 21st. And it turns out, sticks do. An overly skeptical person might have said that the report from Syene was in error, but it's an absolutely straightforward observation. Why would anyone lie on such a trivial matter? Eratosthenes asked himself how it could be that at the same moment, a stick in Syene would cast no shadow, and a stick in Alexandria, 800 kilometers to the north, would cast a very definite shadow. Here's a map of ancient Egypt. I've inserted two sticks, or obelisks, one up here in Alexandria and one down here in Syene. Now, if at a certain moment each stick casts no shadow at all, that's perfectly easy to understand, provided the Earth is flat. If the shadow at Syene is at a certain length, and the shadow at Alexandria is the same length, that also makes sense on a flat Earth. But how could it be, Eratosthenes asked, that at the same instant there was no shadow at Syene and a very substantial shadow at Alexandria? The only answer was that the surface of the Earth is curved. Not only that, but the greater the curvature, the bigger the difference in the lengths of the shadows. The sun is so far away that its rays are parallel when they reach the Earth. Sticks at different angles to the sun's rays will cast shadows at different lengths. For the observed difference in the shadow lengths, the distance between Alexandria and Syene had to be about 7 degrees along the surface of the Earth. By that I mean, if you imagine these sticks extending all the way down to the center of the Earth, they would there intersect at an angle of about 7 degrees. Well, 7 degrees is something like a 50th of the full circumference of the Earth, 360 degrees. Eratosthenes knew the distance between Alexandria and Syene. He knew it was 800 kilometers. Why? Because he hired a man to pace out the entire distance so that he could perform the calculation I'm talking about. Now, 800 kilometers times 50 is 40,000 kilometers. So that must be the circumference of the Earth. That's how far it is to go once around the Earth. That's the right answer. Eratosthenes' only tools were sticks, eyes, feet, and brains, plus a zest for experiment. With those tools, he correctly deduced the circumference of the Earth to high precision, with an error of only a few percent. That's pretty good figuring for 2,200 years ago.
What's the central angle between two poles 800 kilometers away from each other on the surface of a sphere of radius 6,370 kilometers? The angle is 7.19 degrees. Here in Lightwave I've created two such poles that connect at the center of the Earth with an angle between them of 7.19 degrees. I've also added a sphere. And now we have the same circumstances as in the Eratosthenes experiment. I've added a light source at a high altitude above the sphere, and as we can see, as the light source moves from an elevation above the center pole towards the right-hand pole, we can see the shadows changing, exactly as Eratosthenes noted. You can see the shadow of the right pole begins to shrink, while the shadow on the left pole begins to extend as the light source moves. The question is, can we observe these same observations if these poles are on a different kind of surface? For example, on a flat plane or in a concave sphere? This is what we're going to explore now. Here we have the example of a flat plane. I've created a flat Earth. I've added a light source at a certain altitude above the flat plane, and I have arranged for this light source to move over the poles. Exactly the same observations that Eratosthenes made. The length of shadows does not necessarily need a convex sphere to give us the same observations. Similarly, in our convex sphere, with the same exact poles and with the same exact angle between them, I've extended them over to the other side so that they protrude within the inner surface of the sphere, thus having the concave Earth situation. I also moved the light source within the inner concavity of the sphere, and I arranged for it to move in a similar manner as before. When the light source moves above the poles, what we observe is again exactly the same observations that Eratosthenes noticed. We don't need a convex ball in order for us to observe the Eratosthenes observations. The key here is the distance to the Sun, and the distance to the Sun is unknown to us. Eratosthenes made a number of assumptions in order to make a calculation for one of the three options. But that doesn't mean that there are not any other options. There are, and each different option will require the Sun to be at a different distance from the surface of the Earth. Eratosthenes' experiment explores only one of a number of options.
The only answer was that the surface of the Earth is curved.
And how did you conclude that, Carl? It's like saying the only answer was that his brother is gay. And you, Carl, are a moron. That's the only answer. The only answer is that either you're stupid or a fool, or you're an unbiased impulsive who spoke without thinking, or you're a biased religious parrot regurgitating heliocentric doctrine. Bottom line, Carl, you're a liar and a moron. No, Carl, there is not only one answer. There are at least three answers, and multiple variations of them that can yield the same observations. It could be a flat plane with the Sun closer to the surface of the Earth. It could be the outside of a sphere, as you correctly mentioned, with the Sun being very far away, or it could be the inside of a sphere, with us living on the inside surface and the Sun being closer to the surface of the Earth, and the light rays being curved instead of being straight and parallel everywhere. Eratosthenes assumed only one of these three possibilities in his reasoning.
The sun is so far away that its rays are parallel when they reach the Earth.
Are you asking me, Carl, or are you telling me because you know that the sun is very far away? How would you know, Carl? Aren't you just assuming here? Of course you're assuming. You have no idea how far away the sun is. The sun is required to be very far away in order for the Earth to be a convex sphere. It is a requirement, it's not a fact. The hand is so far up the thigh that it is touching the obelisk. Is this a fact, Carl? Or are you assuming this because it fits your story? No, Carl, the hand is not touching the obelisk. It doesn't have to touch the obelisk. The same way as the sun does not have to be so far away. It can be much closer and still yield the same observations, but very different conclusions. We don't know about the sun's rays being parallel. Have we run any experiments all over the globe to test this? Your theory? Your assumption? No, of course we haven't. We don't know if the sun's rays are parallel or they're bending, like in the inside of a concave sphere. No, we have no idea. And our friend Carl assumed that x is equal to 19 in his reasoning, instead of x being 27 or any other value. So he's only giving you his sick and twisted opinion on the story. It's just an opinion. And actually, he is much worse than a moron. He is a deceiver, just like he deceived me when I was a child watching him on Cosmos. And I will explain to you why I say this. This is the two different logic flows. One is the logic flow by Eratosthenes, and the second one is Carl's deception flow. You see, Eratosthenes started by asking some questions. In all honesty, he said, how far away is the sun? Do I know? No, I don't know. Is it near or is it far? He said, okay, let's assume that it's far. Alright? If it's near, I have no idea. He didn't explore that option. But he said, let's say that it's far. Then he asked the second question. He said, are the sun rays parallel and straight? He said, I don't know, I have no idea. They may be curved. I'm not going to explore that option. I'm going to assume that they are straight and parallel, all over the world. And then he asked the third question. He said, is the Earth a convex sphere, and do we live on the surface of this sphere? And he said, I don't know. It could be concave, it could be flat, but I'm going to assume that it is a convex sphere and that we live on its surface. So he took out of the 2 by 2 by 3 out of the 12 options available, Eratosthenes explored only one of these options. And he said, well, in that case, I know what the circumference of this sphere would be. And that was his logical train of thought. However, if you listen carefully to Carl's explanation, you will discover that his way of portraying things is very deceptive. He started like this. How far away is the sun? It's very far, I'm sure of it. So are the sun rays straight and parallel? Of course. So is the Earth a convex sphere? Of course it's a convex sphere. There is no other option. Do you see how he disqualified 11 options and left us with no other option but the one that he wanted to portray? So is the Earth a convex sphere? You have left me no other choice, you moron, since you went to the sun And you can assure me that it is so very far away, and since you did experiments to show that light is so straight and parallel when traveling through the vacuum of space, then the observations can only be explained on a convex sphere. Just how you like it, hey? So, well, in that case, yes, we know the circumference of the sphere, and that's it. Carl Sagan, on behalf of the status quo, disqualified 11 options and presented us with the 12th as being the only valid explanation. Can you see the disgraceful, disgusting, and absolutely deceitful, scientific, mind-controlling indoctrination approach? Case closed. They decided for you, they deceived you, and of course you are going to teach this to your poor children and enslave their minds forever. After all, they know better than you, right? They have PhDs. Yes, PhDs in stupidity and deception. I hope that this is clear to you. Eratosthenes followed an honest approach, while Carl Sagan and the scientific status quo is following a deceptive flow in order to guide your way of thinking and box you into a corner so that they portray themselves as if they know everything, whereas we have no proof. We have no proof for the shape of the Earth. We only have assumptions. Let's remind ourselves once more what we said from the beginning. Do not portray your assumptions as facts unless you're stupid. And here we see 3 attempts at portraying assumption as fact. So on the left we have proof of nothing, while on the right we have proof of stupidity. 11 options are still unexplored, and the status quo doesn't obviously want you to know about. I can already hear some of you complaining, bad this, bad that. There's no buts. The sky is not going to fall. You can still ride your bicycle, you can still drive your car, you can still use your mobile phone. Do not mix applied technology with science fiction. Planes will continue to fly and rockets will continue taking satellites into orbit. Let me remind you that the great philosopher Aristotle believed in a flat Earth until 330 BC, when he accepted the spherical shape of the Earth on empirical grounds. He did not start crying because the sky was going to fall when he changed his mind. Recognize the assumptions, the lies and the deception, and then let the pieces of the puzzle fall where they should, without fear. Just because most of us are used to an idea doesn't mean that when that idea is replaced with the truth, that we're gonna lose something. No, we're gonna gain something. We're gonna gain understanding if the Earth is not a convex ball.
But look at how he is touching Chandler. He must be 19.
Objection, Your Honor, this is irrelevant.
Gee, let me think.
Nah. I don't think so.
Has it crossed your mind that maybe a birth certificate can resolve this once and for all? No more buts, you have no excuses. Stop assuming and start acting. We have to start asking the right questions. We must learn how to ask the right questions. That's irrelevant. You have to face the problem head on.
But we have confirmed the distance to the Sun using the transit of Venus, didn't we? The Sun is 150 million kilometers away. That's what I learned at university. It must be true.
Objection, Your Honor, this is irrelevant.
Gee, let me think.
Nah, I don't think so.
Actually, we haven't confirmed it. Has it ever crossed your mind that we again assumed that the Earth is a convex sphere and that it revolves around the Sun, having no proof? Has it ever crossed your mind that maybe our assumption is actually wrong? No more buts. You have no excuses. Stop assuming. You have to start facing the problem head on. If you want to know what the shape of the Earth is, you have to start measuring the Earth itself, not the transit of Venus across the Sun. It's irrelevant. And it's just as irrelevant as the circumstantial photographic evidence connecting Joey to the number of wives he has in order to prove his age and ultimately my age. It's all circumstantial, loosely connected evidence. Instead of wasting our time assuming, shouldn't we be asking the right questions like, show me some proof of ID, like a birth certificate, maybe? So stop assuming and start listening. Now, I'm gonna reiterate, just in case we forgot. Assumptions are not facts, they are speculation. So do not portray your assumptions as facts, unless you're stupid. Any assumption must be verified beyond a shadow of a doubt in order for it to become fact. Only at that point does it cease to be an assumption. So what were the significant assumptions that Eratosthenes made? 1. The Earth is spherical. Has it been verified? No. The status quo, the universities, mainstream science has not verified the spherical, convex shape of the Earth. Second assumption. The Sun is really far away. Has this been verified? Of course not. Nobody has been to the Sun to verify the distance from the Earth. Number 3. The Sun's rays are straight and parallel. Has this been verified? No. There have been no mainstream experiments taking place in the vacuum of space at long distances in order to verify if there's any curvature to the travel of light. All of these are still assumptions to this day. We have to acknowledge, though, that Eratosthenes had no way of verifying how far away the Sun is or whether light bends. Science was in its infancy and scientists were scarce. Today we have no excuses, though. After 2,200 years, you would expect science to have devised experiments to prove the shape of the Earth beyond a shadow of a doubt. With so much technology and power in our grasp, we're still relying on Eratosthenes and his assumptions without any proof? Let's not be naive. So let's take Eratosthenes' assumptions one by one and check them out. The first assumption, the Earth being spherical. Has this assumption been verified beyond a shadow of a doubt in order for it to become fact? No. Humanity is assuming the Earth is spherical because of the status quo today and nothing more. The idea of a spherical Earth appeared in Greek philosophy with Pythagoras, 6th century BC, although most pre-Socratics retained the flat Earth model. Aristotle accepted the spherical shape of the Earth on empirical grounds around 330 BC, and knowledge of the spherical Earth gradually began to spread beyond the Hellenistic world from then on. The mistaken notion that educated medieval Christians thought the Earth is flat has been referred to as the myth of the flat Earth or the flat error. Since the 20th century, the consensus among historians of science has been that medieval Europeans, with rare exception, put little confidence in a flat Earth model. Now, secondly, most universities teach the status quo. The authorities promote the status quo, for example, the space agencies, and the university graduates go to work for the authorities, and the vicious circle continues. So, the status quo is promoted, it's taught at universities, and the graduates promote the status quo while working at the authorities, the space agencies and the universities. It's something that is promoted and propagated from generation to generation. Let me remind you that just because someone is promoting the status quo does not make the status quo correct. No matter how many degrees and PhDs somebody has, no matter how intelligent he is, no matter how respected he is, it doesn't make it correct. Look at Aristotle. He accepted the spherical shape of the Earth on empirical grounds. So, in order to find out the truth, you have to be prepared, like Aristotle, to discard the status quo, like a flea-ridden jacket, when new empirical data comes in. Otherwise, do not call yourself a scientist. You can wear a robe and a pointy hat and call yourself a religious cult follower instead. So, what are the empirical data we already have on the shape of our Earth? That prove a spherical, convex sphere on the surface of which we live. Do we have any empirical data to prove this assumption beyond a shadow of a doubt? Of course not. The status quo has never run any experiments to test the actual curvature of the Earth, so we have to rely on indirect, circumstantial evidence, like various government agency photos and videos from space, the ships appearing and disappearing over the horizon half first, like we learned at school, the lunar eclipses, the 24-hour time zones, the length of shadows of identical poles, which is cyclical reasoning, and the circumnavigation of the Earth. Number 6, the circumnavigation of the Earth does not require a sphere. Going around a point in a circle does not necessarily require a spherical shape. It could be any shape. It could be a flat plane, it could be a cone, it could be a cylinder. Now, all the other points rely on light, assuming light is straight. So immediately we see a problem with all the other points. Furthermore, number 5, the length of shadows of identical poles, as we've already seen, and as we've already called it Carl Sagan's deception, does not require a spherical Earth. Point number 5 should be removed from this list and only be included again when the Sun is proven to be very far away and when its light rays are proven to be straight and parallel. The first point, the various government agency photos and videos from space. Every picture of Earth ever taken shows only a circular shape, and the only geometric solid which looks like a circle from any direction is a sphere. Now we have several problems with this. First of all, many photos and videos fail professional scrutiny. For example, we can see clouds in some NASA pictures that have been copy-pasted. We can see bubbles in some videos as if they're taken inside a large swimming pool. We can see artifacts in some videos that are later removed by NASA, etc., etc. Most photos are mosaics or of smaller photos joined together, like for example Google Earth. We think that they're actual photos, but in reality they're mosaics. Many photos are taken using a fisheye wide-angle lens, distorting the horizon into a definite curve. For example, the GoPro Red Bull video. And people see this video and they think that it's actually the curvature of the Earth, whereas it's not. It's just a wide-angle lens distorting the horizon into looking as if it's a convex sphere. Most photos are taken from a very low elevation, which disqualifies it geometrically from giving us a full hemisphere view. But even photos taken from the GOES satellites at 35,000 kilometers from the surface of the Earth, NASA specifically says that they do not have a 1/2 hemisphere coverage. As you can see here, the coverage map of the GOES satellites had a very limited coverage. You see? It was very limited, the coverage. And the photos that we have from this limited coverage, they look very familiar. But they're not showing half the Earth. They're showing a limited coverage. You see? They're showing a very small coverage of the Earth. Not even half a hemisphere. This is another problem, that we have to rely on an exclusive group to give us the truth, which is not very scientific. And lastly, and most importantly, it's visual evidence, and this visual evidence relies on light being straight, which it is not. Isn't it strange that we have been in space since the 1960s, but no government agency has bothered to do light experiments in the vacuum of space to test its curvature, or even to prove that light follows the curvature of space, as the general theory of relativity claims? It has been 60 years now. Did we forget that we need to test our theory claims? All proponents of the various competing Earth models agree that government agency testimony is not reliable empirical data. As long as a scientific law can be tested using experiments or observations, it is considered an empirical law. But if the experiment or observation can only be reproduced by a government agency, then you have to take their word for it, and blindly trusting a witness is not exactly science, is it? Agency photos and videos from space. This point is at best unreliable. It is not a question of conspiracy. Government agencies, just like most corporations, adopt a need-to-know pyramidal hierarchy. This is why we have the term industrial espionage, or plainly, spy games. There is certainly information that is kept secret from the population, and even from most employees in a corporation, for various reasons, for example weapons development or just keeping a recipe secret. It looks to me plain and simple. Yes, the visible Earth, emphasis on visible, is round. This is what we see in photos and videos. But look at the data presented on this page again. Are the government agencies deceiving you, or are you deceiving yourself? The emphasis here is on caveat emptor, which means that you have the ultimate responsibility for what you believe. You have to assume that any third party is out there to deceive you. Why? Why does a thief steal anything? You cannot be naive. You have to do your due diligence before you buy into something. Number 2. Ships appearing and disappearing over the horizon. How first? Problems. It's an indirect evidence. It's circumstantial evidence. Looking at a ship from 5 kilometers away does not describe the shape of the Earth. Just because we have a cutoff of light at the horizon, this doesn't mean that the Earth is a sphere. It can be explained by either a physical bulge, or it can be conversely explained by a light bulge or a light curve. So this means that the Earth could be any shape with light bending. The Navy has data collected and revised over many centuries, and data from the Bowditch Naval Manual proves that light is bending. Most importantly, this circumstantial visual evidence relies on light being straight, but light is not straight. It has been proven to be bending by the Navy. No straight light has ever been witnessed anywhere. So mainstream science, in order to make everything fit into the heliocentric Copernican model, has decided to take straight light as being the norm And consequently, they have decided to dump all light bending that we witness everywhere on Earth into the large garbage bin we call atmospheric refraction. And all of this without any actual tests run to see whether light is straight in the vacuum of space. Number 3. The lunar eclipses. Again, this is circumstantial, indirect visual evidence. Looking at a celestial body from hundreds of kilometers away does not describe the shape of the Earth. We're assuming that if light is straight, and if that shadow that we observe on the moon is caused by the shape of the Earth, we're assuming that the Earth is a sphere. But that shadow, if light is bending as we observe everywhere, then that shadow could be explained in other ways. Fourth is the 24-hour time zones. Again, having time zones in this point means that we're looking at the sun from hundreds of kilometers away, and looking at an object hundreds of kilometers away from the Earth does not describe the shape of the Earth directly. All these are indirect points proposed as evidence, and they're all visual evidence. They rely on light being straight in order to be of any value to us. But we have evidence that shows that light is not straight. Are you beginning to see a pattern here? Can you see the conspiracy of all ages forming? All empirical data that we already have are visual evidence and rely on light being straight in order to be of any assistance to determine the shape of the Earth. They're all visual evidence. All our empirical data relies on other objects to tell us where we're standing on and what shape what we're standing on is. Today I'm giving this conspiracy a name. It's called the conspiracy of stupidity. Or if you prefer, it's called the conspiracy of PhD morons.
Hey bro, do you know where we are? Of course I know. I can see a giraffe in the distance, so we must be on a giraffe. There is no other logical conclusion.
Don't be silly, boys. The color of this leather is surely that of a hippo. I used to live on a hippo. Look at these photos.
You are both wrong. This stinker is a rhino. Believe me, I did my PhD on this and teach this for a living.
Yeah. And my imaginary brother is gay. Stupid idiots. Why don't you study me? Instead of studying all the other animals? In your wisdom you became fools. You are irrelevant. You have become irrelevant.
Can you believe that in the whole of human history, nobody has ever sat down to devise a simple experiment to measure the actual shape of the Earth? Can you believe that all these philosophers, mathematicians, PhDs, and universities throughout human history have been assuming the shape of the Earth based on external and probably irrelevant factors? Believe it. It's the conspiracy of idiots. The Earth being spherical, a convex sphere, can this assumption be tested and verified beyond a shadow of a doubt in order for it to become fact? Can it? Actually, yes. And the solution is so simple that it has escaped every government agency and university in the world. Surprise, surprise. The rectilineator experiment is an experiment designed to measure the actual shape of the Earth. It was conducted only once in the history of humankind, in 1897, and then it was buried forever. Conspiracy or just fear and stupidity? Who cares? It is the one and only way to determine beyond a shadow of a doubt the shape of the Earth. The shape was shown to be concave, or the inside of a sphere, when it was carried out. The intelligent among you are now beginning to see beyond the smoke and mirrors. The last two assumptions made by Eratosthenes are based on light again. The sun is really far away. It's based on light. The sun's rays are straight and parallel. Again, it's light-based. Both of them are dependent on light. Since we cannot go to the sun, we cannot hope to measure its distance without a doubt. And since the government agencies and universities are not bothered to do any light curvature experiments in the vacuum of space, we have no hope of measuring its curvature and how parallel it really is. Determining the shape of the Earth will also determine the sun's distance and size and the shape of light. Not the other way around, as we've been doing all along like idiots. Everything will fall into position once we determine the shape of the Earth. We cannot determine the shape of the Earth based on visual and optical information from other objects around us. That is insane. Are you going to address the elephant in the room? Or are you happy consuming and rolling in all the crap that comes out of great asses while sitting on yours? Straight light has never been observed anywhere. The Bowditch Naval Manual is a testimony to this fact, but humanity has chosen to base its very existence, science and philosophy on the assumption that light is straight. We have been reduced to a race of intellectual midgets on the back of an elephant waiting to be noticed. Until the results come out on the second rectilinear experiment currently underway by Stephen Christ, we will never know beyond a shadow of a doubt. Do you enjoy arguing in vain? Are you afraid of knowing the absolute truth? Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, and I will also forget thy children. No matter what your bias, support the rectilinear experiment, take part in it, be a part of history. After all, it could prove your Earth model correct once and for all. Stop looking at it, start measuring it. I've had enough of irrelevant assumptions and pointless arguments and discussions. Let's take action. Stop assuming and start asking the right questions. We have been deceived. Intentionally or unintentionally, it makes no difference. We're still deceived. Some people talk about conspiracy. I say caveat emptor, because ultimately it's your responsibility what you buy into. So it looks more like blind faith to me is the problem. Don't make universities and government institutions your church and your religion. And remember what I told you in the beginning. If it eventually turns out that we manage to get the answer right about the Earth being convex, it would be only by accident.
Nah, I don't think so.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you found this information useful and educational. Bye for now.